The play on the field, the court, and the ice is just one part of sports. Behind every game are the people hard at work so we can enjoy the action. They're the owners, administrators, agents, broadcasters, and vendors who bring the games to life. Meet them when you go Behind the Game with Patrick Klinger and Dave Bowden.
Welcome to Behind the Game, presented by KLN Family Brands, a great Minnesota company making great Minnesota products for people and pets, including Wiley Wallaby licorice, best licorice you'll ever have, Sweet Chaos popcorn, and Nutrisource pet foods. My co-host Dave Bowden is unable to join us this week. He's making a trek down to Arkansas. I'm Patrick Klinger, president of Agile Marketing Partners. On Behind the Game, we typically focus on the business of sports, and we're going to touch on sports a little bit today, but we're also going to delve into some other very important topics, and we're going to do it with a person I consider to be really a Renaissance man. He's a former political operative, a lobbyist, an event organizer, a community activist, some would say maybe agitator, riverboat captain,
yes,
nonprofit CEO, author, father, husband, and a good friend, Erich Mische.
Good to see you, Patrick.
Yeah.
Calling me a Renaissance man makes me feel as old as I am.
You are indeed, though. Hey, welcome to Behind the Game. It's really a pleasure to have you on the show.
Well, thanks for having me here, and I'm sorry I missed Dave, but good to be here with you.
You have had a remarkably diverse career, right? Very impactful as well. To begin with, can you tell us a little bit about your role now as the CEO of SAVE?
Yeah, so I am the CEO of SAVE, an organization you're familiar with. You were a board member for 18 plus years. We are a Minnesota-based national nonprofit that focuses on suicide awareness and suicide prevention. We do that through what we call our 4 pillars: education and training, advocacy, support for suicide loss survivors, and lethal means safety. So it is a great organization. I'm thrilled to be a part of it. Have a great team that does incredible work. And I think we're really making an impact today in a way that it feels good about the work we're doing.
Yeah. You and I share that passion for suicide prevention, but it's a difficult field. I mean, you're dealing with tragedy and trauma on a daily basis. And what is it that brought you to SAVE? And where did your passion for the cause come from?
Yeah, so I come from I tell people that, my background is really about public service, whether it was working in government or politics. The nonprofit world is really, for me, is a continuation, an extension of public service. For me, I come from a family that has a long history of dealing with mental illness and mental health issues. I also have a long history with suicide. My best friend, Alan, died by suicide in a small town in North Dakota 45 years ago. He was 16 years old at a time when people talked in very hushed tones about suicide, where there was a lot of stigma attached to it. There was a lot of controversy, right? We judged people who died by suicide. We judged their families. And so you and I had an opportunity to talk about the focus that the SAVE board had at the time to say we want to get back to our grassroots focus. We want to get back to working in the community, really kind of get back to the mission and the vision that the founders had 36 years ago. And so that mission and that desire on the part of the board to bring the organization back to its roots spoke very deeply to me. And so this August will be my 2 years in this role. And I will say, of all the work that I've done in my life and career, this feels like the exact place where I should be right now.
That's great. You've said that social media, you believe, is more dangerous to youth today than drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
Why do you feel that way?
Yeah, unequivocally. I said before, social media and its impact on kids is a clear and present danger today, unlike anything we have seen in a generation. Social media is ubiquitous. It is everywhere. It is rooted in our own adult DNA, and it is something that children today, it's from cradle to grave. And unfortunately, for far too many kids, when I say cradle to grave, I mean that literally. We are seeing instances of sextortion and sex trafficking, bullying, kids buying drugs on things like Snapchat that are laced with fentanyl and being poisoned and dying from it. We're seeing increases in suicidal ideation and suicide. And these are things that happen every single second of the day, everywhere around the world. And for SAVE, as we looked at this issue and we looked at what our mission is, it became very clear to us very early in this, in my tenure here, that if we were going to do something that was going to have an immediate impact to help protect kids, it was to get involved in these discussions and debates about how do we make big tech companies that own these platforms be accountable to the products that they're creating. I've said often, and I continue to say, big tech is today's big tobacco. Big tobacco operated in much the same way big tech does today. When it came time to regulate their products, they spent billions of dollars to prevent regulation from happening. We're seeing that happen today with big tech. And it's up to all of us to get into this fight, because it really is a fight for our kids' future.
And how is that fight going? You feel like you're making progress?
You know, every day I think we make a little progress. I'm very pleased that this year we were able to work with Representative Zach Stevenson and get the first of its kind bill passed in the nation, which will require warning labels on social media platforms in Minnesota beginning in 2026. We work alongside parents all over the country who have lost their kids to choking games, who have been bullied and died by suicide. We work with a mom in Hastings, Bridget Noring, whose son Devin bought illegal drugs on Snapchat, went home, put it in his mouth. It was laced with so much fentanyl that he died before he even ingested that pill. And so every day I think we make a little bit more impact. A big challenge is amplifying the message that social media, while it's an important part of our lives, and it's one that the genie's out of the bottle, you're not going to be able to put the genie back in, but we do have to recognize that this is a product that is causing irreparable harm to our kids.
Yeah. Well, it's not lost on me that we taped this show in Egan TV studios inside Egan High School, and you know what these kids are dealing with today, the pressures that they have are far beyond what I think you and I experienced 40 years ago.
Unequivocally, absolutely.
You know, prior to you taking the helm of SAVE, you were the CEO of Spare Key,
yes,
a nonprofit organization that provides financial assistance to families and individuals going through a medical crisis. In order to raise some funds and awareness for Spare Key, you did something really, really fascinating.
And dumb.
Well, I remember when you told me about it, I questioned your sanity,
Yeah.
which I've done a few times
Yes.
over the years that
Wouldn't be
we've
the
known
first
each other.
time. Yeah.
But you took a homemade raft
Yeah.
down the Mississippi River from St. Paul to Louisiana.
Yeah.
Give us a little bit of the backstory
Yeah.
behind that.
So this was 2020, and as you recall, COVID had just kind of become ubiquitous and become everywhere. And so SAVE, like a lot of nonprofits, essentially had to shutter its doors, right? We had to cancel all of our fundraising events, and it was a question of what were we going to do to stay open, right? And so on June 16th of my birthday in 2020, I was taking a bike ride along the Mississippi River, desperately trying to figure out what we were going to do to raise money. And as I was looking at the river, I came up with this idea that, I was going to take a canoe down the river. And then I was like, you don't know how to canoe. Then I was like, well, I'll take a kayak. And I was like, okay, you don't know how to do that. So eventually it came down to the idea that I would take a raft down the river. And to make a long story short, what we ultimately ended up doing is we built a raft with a 50-year-old rotted out pontoon, and we took a Home Depot garden shed that I picked up at the
Sounds
local.
perfectly logical.
Very logical. Picked up a Home Depot garden shed, brought it to the warehouse where we were building this thing, and cut it up and put it on the top of this. And one of the things that we did is we went out and got sponsors for this. And so by the time we launched the raft, it was outfitted like a NASCAR, right, with sponsor logos all over it. So I took off from St. Paul's Harriet Island in August of 2000, and 2 months later ended up at Baton Rouge. It was 1,700 miles, 2 months, 10 states. It was an incredible journey, and it's one that I tell people. We raised a lot of money. It certainly helped to keep our doors open and keep the organization going today, and that organization's led by Sarah Rocklitz, who's a dear friend. She's doing incredible work. But one of the things that struck me about that trip is that despite COVID, despite the division of a big national election that was going on at the time, everywhere I stopped, nobody asked me if I was a Democrat or Republican. They didn't ask if I was a liberal or conservative. They didn't ask me who I was voting for. What they asked me was, how can I help? And I will say that for me is the most remarkable thing about this country, is that no matter where you go, despite the division that we see and all of the animosity that takes place on social media and elsewhere, we live in a pretty incredible country where people every single day are reaching out to ask people, what can I do to help?
Yeah. Well, as someone who was born and raised on the banks of the Mississippi in Winona, I know the power of the river.
Yeah.
And so when you took off that day, and I was there for it, and I hope he comes back, because
me too. Me too. It was, it's interesting.
And you wrote a book about this.
I wrote a book about it called Hope on the River, and if people want to buy it, 100% of the proceeds from the book go to Support Spear Key. Go to hopeontheriver.com. It's fascinating because the upper part of the Mississippi River with the locks and dams had its own particular challenges for an idiot on the river. Again, I know nothing about boating, certainly didn't know anything about the river, but once you get past the upper river and where the lock and dam system ends, the river becomes much faster. And in addition to that, because of the lock and dam system, all of the barge traffic above the lock and dam system is limited to about 13 to 15 barges, right? Which if you are in St. Paul or Minneapolis and you see the tows pushing these things, look pretty big. Well, when you start getting the lower river and they're pushing 48 or 62 of these things, it's like a city coming right at you. And so there were a lot of close misses, near misses. I nearly sank multiple times. The thing leaked the whole way down. You had to constantly pump it out. And so the fact that I'm here shows that I made it. I was always grateful for that. It was a great adventure.
Well, some really remarkable stories in the book. I've read it. It's a little bit like Huck Finn. It's a little modern day Huck Finn. It's remarkable.
It was. And again, you don't do these things alone. I had an incredible group of friends and family. My son helped build it, my brother and his daughter, my dear friend John Appitz and Raven's aunt and some other folks helped to put this thing together. The fact that it survived the entire trip was remarkable. The fact that I survived with it was a combination of a lot of prayers and a lot of good wishes from people.
Yeah. Your journey also includes significant time in politics, Erich, including as chief of staff for Mayor Norm Coleman when he was in St. Paul, and then Senator Norm Coleman when he was in Washington, D.C. After that, you became a lobbyist. As you reflect back on your political career, what really sticks out to you? What did you take away from that?
What I took away and what I take away from that is the opportunity that all of us as Americans have to make a difference, right? To make a difference in the country we live in, make an impact, and whether you're somebody who works in politics or in government, or you're just an average person on the street, all of us have the opportunity to make a difference and an impact. I was in government politics and public policy at a time when I think we still had the capacity for people on all different ideological spectrum to be able to work together. That's gotten a lot more difficult today. I don't think that's good for the country, which is why one of the things that I try to impress upon people is, don't look at the government in Washington, D.C., or even in St. Paul, or in whatever your state capital is, as the solution to the things that you think need to be fixed. Ultimately, if you want to see change in this country, you have been given the inalienable right in the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and every other founding document that this country was built on to go do something and make a difference and help the country be a better place.
Yeah, that's great. Let's talk about some of the big projects you were involved with when you were in St. Paul working for Mayor Coleman. You led the referendum to get a new Twins ballpark built in St. Paul in 1999. You were also a big part of bringing the NHL back to Minnesota.
Yeah.
One of them succeeded.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have the Minnesota Wild.
That's right.
One of them did not.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? What happened with the referendum versus what happened with the Wild?
Yeah, I would tell you that had we gotten the XL Energy Center approved before we did the Twins referendum, we would have won the Twins referendum. We lost the Twins referendum for a number of different reasons. One is you had an unpopular ownership team at the time. I think there was a general animosity against owners coming in and asking for money to build stadiums. So I think there was an undercurrent of bitterness and resentment and the idea of why are we bailing these folks out, right? We spent a lot of money on the referendum. We spent far more money than the opponents did. We got our butts kicked. I mean, we lost 60% to 40%. It was a drubbing. I will say this, is that I think ultimately it helped to pave the way for the St. Paul Saints to do the CHS Stadium. I still think that St. Paul would have been an incredible place for a Twin Stadium on the banks of the Mississippi River. Yeah. Be that as it may, the Saints are here. They're a great organization. They do great work in the community, great product, and now they're a part of the Twins organization. The NHL, bringing the XL Energy Center back was difficult and challenging, but we're a hockey state, right? And so that was a big piece of it. It was that anger and animosity was directed at Norm Green for taking our hockey team out of Minnesota. And so I think there was a built-in constituency that was much more vocal, much more engaged in their community that helped to come together to make that happen. And you can't ignore the fact that Norm Coleman was on a mission to get this done. And so it was an easier sell. It was an easier opportunity to work with the state of Minnesota to get it done. But I've always maintained that had we been able to get the XL Energy Center project done first and then brought the referendum up, I think we would have gotten the Twin Stadium.
Yeah. Sometimes you don't know what you have until it's gone, right? You take it for granted. The North Stars leave. Minnesota, the state of hockey, has no NHL team.
Right. That's
and
right.
I think there was a great desire to bring hockey back.
Yeah.
And you're right. The Twins at the time, the ownership group, maybe it could be argued now, maybe not tremendously popular. And
and it was, it's different times today than it was then. But Carl Pohlad, in the frustrating thing I will tell you, because I had an opportunity to meet Carl a number of times during that process. And, if you look at the good that the Pohlad family has done in this community, it's extraordinary. And so I think oftentimes, we get fixated on the idea that, there's people out there who are trying to take advantage of us. And it is what it is. But, I'm happy the Wild's here, happy the Saints are here, and pleased that the Twins are still in Minnesota.
Absolutely. Beyond sports, you helped bring some major cultural attractions and exhibits to St. Paul, including the Smithsonian, Titanic. You did Peanuts on Parade.
Yeah.
We're not seeing those kind of events in St. Paul these days. Do you think the city is lacking some aggressiveness to go after those kind of attractions?
I think it may be more complex than that. I think there's a general sense that St. Paul and it may not be as safe and clean and as affordable as it once was. I think that has an impact on it. I think the other piece of it is that urban centers are still struggling to recover from COVID. I think part of it too is vision, right? I think you got to have a vision that your urban centers are going to be gathering places for communities. I think Minneapolis does a really good job with that. I would love to see more of those kind of attractions in St. Paul. I think, at a time when we were doing these kind of things, I had the privilege of working with the mayor who was willing to push the boundaries, right? I still remember, and you will recall, when I had to go over and tell Chris Hansen that the mayor of St. Paul wanted America's Traveling Smithsonian to come over to the Civic Center. And Chris was like, absolutely not. The rodeo was at that time, and I went back and told the mayor that Chris Hansen said absolutely not, the rodeo, and the mayor said, you go back and tell Chris Hansen who the mayor is and that I want the Smithsonian. And so we got it done, right?
We did.
It was great.
Yeah. All of these diverse experiences seem to converge in your new book,
Yes.
Go Effing Do Something.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank
First of
you.
all, anybody who writes a book has my respect and admiration. I think it's a tremendous undertaking. The title is undeniably bold and direct.
Yeah.
I mean, what was the spark behind this book and the title?
Yeah, one is anybody who knows me, and because this is a family show, I've had to clean up my language, obviously, but I tend to be as direct as I can be on most things, right? I think for me, it was, this book has been a long time in my head, and really what kind of pushed me ultimately is this last national election that we had. And it's not who won and who lost, it was after that election, and even before that election was over with, you know, watching everybody complain about everything and thinking that somehow or another they're complaining and posts on social media somehow are changing anything, right? We live in a country where, again, we are unlike any country in the world. We are the most indispensable nation on the earth, and I have said this before, there has never been a country like the United States. We have the ability as Americans to change the course of our country's future in little ways and in big ways. I think we spend so much time wringing our hands that we don't know what to do, that we simply don't do anything. We get obsessed with what goes on in Washington, D.C. when 95% of what impacts our life happens outside our front door, right? Mm-hmm. Nothing that goes on in Washington on most days has any direct impact on our lives. What happens at your school board, what happens at a city council meeting, what happens at state legislature or county board, those are the things that impact whether your streets are going to get plowed, how much your property taxes are going to go up, whether there's enough police on the street, whether somebody's cleaning up the graffiti. Those are the things that we've lost sight of. And in addition to that, we've lost sight of the fact that civic responsibility requires us to go effing do something, right? Not just to talk about it, not just to complain about it, but to go do it. And going and doing things doesn't require permission from the government. It doesn't require permission from anybody. You know, I've been in places where I went out and cleaned up garbage dumps in parking lots in the city simply because the city, the county, and the state weren't doing it. No, I didn't have to ask anybody to go do that. I got some trash bags and a rake and shovels, and then some other friends and folks showed up and helped clean it up. We try so hard these days to come up with excuses about why we don't go fix those things that we want to see fixed, that they don't get fixed, and then it keeps getting worse and worse, and then our solution is to blame somebody other than ourselves for not having done it. That's a load of stuff, right, that I can't say, but one of the things that compelled me to write this book also is, I think as a dad, as a parent, part of my obligation as an American citizen and as a parent is to lead by example. And so I've tried to do that in my life, in my career. And my hope is that I've demonstrated to my kids that you can have lots of opinions. You know, opinions are great. Everybody's got one. Or you can go out and do the things that need to be done to make the country and the city and your neighborhood the place you want it to be. If we're not willing to do it, nobody else is coming to save us. It's up to us to do it.
So there are some people who are they're afraid to get out of their comfort zone.
Yeah.
Or they're risk adverse. They're fearful of being criticized. Right? What would you say to those people who are just simply they're comfortable in their life,
yeah,
and they're happy pointing fingers at others?
I would say that while you're doing that, the people that you're complaining about are going to continue to do the things or not do the things that you want them to do. Life is short, And you get criticized for just about anything that you do in life these days, right? Social media, again, you can get criticized for just about anything, which is mostly nobody's business, right? But we decided that everybody's business is our business, right? That's the other part of the book is mind your own business, right? What I would say to people is that if you're afraid of getting criticized, if you're afraid of doing something wrong, you know what? Go do it anyhow. Right? What's the worst that's going to happen? Somebody's going to say something mean about you, right? Somebody's going to tell you that you can't do it. And I just think that, again, we need to understand that if you want the country to be the kind of country you want it to be, if you want your communities and your neighborhood to be the kind of places you want it to be, they aren't going to be that way unless you invest something more than just an opinion. Because in the absence of you doing it, somebody else will do it, and you may not like the outcome.
Yeah. From political strategy to nonprofit leadership to organizing events, to taking a transformative river journey, really. I mean, you've taken significant action. You're one of those people, I've known you for a long time. You're not afraid. But has criticism ever stopped you from doing something that you thought you should do?
So let me first say I am not the bravest person in the world, right? In the book I say I'm afraid of the dark, scared of wild animals. All of those things are true. There is nothing inherently courageous about me, right? Do I get scared about going out and taking those risks? Absolutely, right? My heart pounds, I get anxious, right? I stay up at night. There are times when I go, oh my gosh, I screwed this one up this time, right? Boy, I did the wrong thing. There has never been anybody who's ever criticized me or threatened to criticize me that has stopped me from doing something that I think is important, which isn't to say that there aren't times when my wife and other people smarter than me, which makes up most of the human population, don't do a good job of convincing me that maybe that great idea that I think is a great idea is maybe not as great as I think it is. So I am blessed to have people who are willing to tell me that I may not be as smart as I think I am. And I think you got to be willing to listen to those voices. But there's never been a time when I've ever decided that something is important or needs to be done that I've not done just because I was worried that somebody was going to criticize me for it.
At SAVE, you lead efforts to inspire and motivate people to take action. You know, not just stand by if they see somebody who's in trouble, right? How does what you champion in the book, how are you applying that to what you're doing at SAVE?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a direct correlation. I think the work that we're doing in social media, in trying to regulate it and trying to advocate for it. You know, we just got done, as you well know, because you were a big part of this, in securing $8 million from the state of Minnesota to put suicide prevention barriers on a bridge here in Minnesota to help prevent suicide and save lives. And sometimes you got to take risks there, right? You got to push people. You got to get people outside their comfort zone. And that was a situation where we clearly had people who conventional wisdom says you don't talk about these things. And we were like, 50 years of people dying at this location demands that we talk about it. And the fact that we talked about it and went and did something about it along with others in the community meant that there's now $8 million where the University of Minnesota is going to be able to do the work that needs to be done to help prevent suicide and save lives. So the work that we're doing in advocacy, whether it's that kind of work, social media, trying to engage people to talk about why we need trigger gun locks on guns in homes, pushing for more funding for suicide prevention and things like that, all of those are part and parcel of trying to rally people and say, we've got to go do something.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we come to the end of the show. That was a quick conversation. Where can people buy Go Effing?
They can go on Amazon, and you got to probably type in my name.
Yeah.
So right there, you can go type in that on Amazon, and you can get this in paperback and Kindle. And I'll tell you, it's a pretty thin book. It takes about 2 hours to read it, but I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah. Thank you, Erich.
Thanks for having me.
Wonderful conversation. Thank all of you for watching Behind the Game. Thank you to KLN Family Brands, and we'll see you again next month.